Today on With the First Pick, summer scouting continues, and we're talking edge rushers and interior defensive linemen. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's Rick Spielman, and that's Mike Renner. Mike, of course, will be joining us all summer for summer scouting over these next few weeks. If you missed it, Rick, we've already covered every offensive position. You can check that out in the old podcast feed. Before we get going, episode 169. Let me find my button here, Rick. How many days?
Oh, with the wheel spinning
to the 2025 NFL Draft?
I know this is the most exciting part of this podcast for you, Mike, and I know you probably do. You have a calendar of your own somewhere in that luxurious apartment you live in?
In-house.
I don't. I'm actually clearing it out because I'm moving out this week to go down to Florida here. So,
will you bring the calendar with you?
I'll bring one. I'll have one set up when I get down there. Count down the days.
Okay, so everybody, there are 274 days until the 2025 NFL Draft.
How you feel about that, Rick?
Well, I just like you got that giant redwood in the forest, and you got a little axe, and you just take one stroke at a time, and eventually that thing will fall down. So we have 274 days to chop that tree down until the draft comes.
So Rick, I'm hearing.
What day would you end up? Like, what day do you start actually watching tape on guys as a GM, or when did you? How many days till the draft were you?
I did some summer stuff like this, not summer scouting school, but most of the time we went to we were part of Blesto Combine Service. So went in there and got a feel for making and creating the lists. Then when the scouts come in, everybody's reporting to training camp, kind of laying out where they were going to go in the fall. So we didn't step on each other, just to make sure we were spread out, so we got all the looks we needed to. But most of the time, this time of year, it was all honed in and focused on some of the needs that we still have to address, waiting for the preseason to start, because we would do a bunch of tape on guys that we would potentially look at in the preseason. And most of the time, I'm just sitting there watching practice every day, because you got some very difficult decisions to make for the 53-man cut in the practice squad. So basically, you're honed in as a general manager right now on your roster and other teams' rosters as you get ready. I usually started my reward was to always go to the Labor Day game. Whoever played on Labor Day, that was the first time that week after we got through everything that I would start at least looking at those two schools I was going to go down and see, then go down and see them in person. My schedule during the season was Monday, review game and meet owners meetings, everything. Tuesday, workout guys. Started actually looking at a little bit of a couple of the potential UFAs coming in. Wednesday was the day that I tried to spend as much time on the college guys as I did in between practices and everything else you were doing, because I try to always get to a game Thursday or Friday or Saturday if I could, just to get a live look on these guys.
So are you busier now or then?
Well, what are you counting as busy?
Spending time with me and Mike and Harry.
Oh, no, this is way more stressful than it is being a general manager. Although I'll say, just as a teaser coming up, I had one or two, how do you say it, political brain farts coming up. So we'll look forward to this show. And I'll admit where I made a mistake or two.
What?
Yes.
Man, someone's turned over a new leaf, Harry. I'm concerned about this new
It's summer. It's summer.
It is summer. 274 days. And by the way, before Mike actually asked a pretty interesting question, I was going to joke that you're the guy that goes into the wood and chops down the 400-year-old tree to make a point. So you're the guy who chops down redwoods for fun with a tiny little hand axe.
Yeah. Now all the environmentalists out there will be protesting this show.
They'll be on you. Well, I look forward to you admitting the mistakes, because it's been more than 274 days since you've admitted a mistake to me. So that's going to be a new one.
Not also a mistake, a correction.
A correction.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we should also point out that Mike's been kind enough to join us for the summer scouting series. Mike totally blew us off this morning. We had to text him and get him on the horn. He was, I don't know what putting his wig on, getting his mustache right.
It was a different time today, wasn't it? Was it not?
That's Harry's fault,
They moved it on me, and I think that was in the middle of the golf event that I got that email moving it, and I was like, okay. And then I had enough beers in the course that that got erased from my memory, apparently.
I thought you were going to make fun of him, Rick. Nothing. How about that? Nothing.
No, because I am humbled today as I.
Right, let's get to it because I want to see what this humbling's all about. Before we do, though, I should mention if you're watching us live-ish, we're recording this on July 24th, and I should let you know that some of our favorite people over in Cover 3, the podcast with Chip Patterson, Bud Elliott, Danny Cannell, and Tom Fernelli, they're all in Indy this week for Big Ten Media Days. You can watch them wherever you get your podcast. They had Emeka Egbuka on yesterday on Monday's show. That was interesting. They had him on set, and they're going to have a bunch of other guys coming through this week. So if you love college football, and I'm guessing you do if you're watching us here, check out Cover 3 wherever you get your podcast or even on CBS Sports Network at 1 p.m. Eastern all this week. All right, here's the deal for our purposes here. We each separately ranked our top 5 edge rushers and interior defensive linemen in the 2025 class, and then we combined our list for an overall ranking. And we'll have some comps and some draft ranges. See how many squeeze balls Rick goes through today. First things first, starting with the old edge rushers. And Rick, do you want to preface what we're about to hear from you, or you'll just do it naturally as we get through it?
No, I just let it organically grow.
Okay. I look forward to that then. First up, edge rushers, as I mentioned, if you watch this on YouTube, producer Harry doing yeoman's work with the graphics once again. Rick, James Pearce out of Tennessee. You and Mike have him at number 1. J.T. Tuimoloau out of Ohio State, and then Jack Sawyer 2 and 3 for you out of Ohio State, Rick. Nic Scourton out of out the Purdue transfer at Texas. Where's he now? Texas Tech?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. Okay.
Yeah, it was at Purdue last year.
I was thrown off by the graphic there. And then what's Princely's last name? How do you want to pronounce that, Rick?
Uman-Mielen.
That's not bad. Uman-Mielen. That's pretty good. So he transferred from Florida to Ole Miss. I watched him as well last year. I don't know if we talked about him. We may have a little bit because there was some conversations he might come out. Mike also has James Pearce, and Mike has Mike Williams out of Georgia at number 2. Nic Scourton at 3. Abdul Carter, which is a fun name, and I debated whether to talk about him now or next week when we talk about linebackers. He's making the move from linebacker to edge rusher. We can talk about him later in the show in terms of particulars, what that means. And then Dennis Sutton. Both Abdul and Dennis Sutton are out of Penn State. My list is Michael Williams. I'm the only one that had him number 1 overall, so I'm sure Rick has some thoughts on that. Followed by James Pearce, J.T. Tuimoloau, Landon Jackson out of Arkansas, and then the aforementioned Princely Uman-Mielen, who is now at Ole Miss. All right, those are individual lists. Harry did the math. Number 1, James Pearce Jr. And I don't think you got the comps this week, Rick, so we'll play the game once again, but Mike, I'll start with you. James Pearce Jr., number 1 for you and Rick, number 2 for me. What do you got?
Yeah, to me, he's just that body type that, falls in the range of like the Khalil Macks, the Von Millers, the Will Andersons, the Dallas Turners, where he's just long, lean, explosive, flexible. Like that's built for the edge. The guy moves, at 6'5" in the 240-ish range. He moves like a wide receiver. I mean, there's the explosiveness, the ability to change directions, the ability to get to the edge. It's unique, and it's like when you see it, it's what works at the NFL, right? Like there's really is a type that works off the edge, and he has all those physical abilities. Now, I'd love for him to get stronger. He still is very lean. He's still, I think it was the Georgia game against was going against Samir Sims. I might be thinking of the wrong game, but one of the bigger tackles he faced, his bull rushes just died on contact. I think it was actually J.C. Latham. He really could not do anything against him in that Alabama game. So that is the worry for me right now. But again, he's a second-year guy and a young dude, and really has the frame to, almost looks like Myles Garrett's frame early on in his career at Texas A&M, where he was really lean, and then all of a sudden he was 272 pounds at the combine. I could see a similar sort of filling out from James Pearce over the next year and a half going to the NFL draft and the NFL. Yeah,
Mike makes a good point. He is a junior, 6'5", 242 unofficially, so it looks like you would like him to add a few more pounds. I saw a lot of the same stuff. I thought at times he struggled to get off blocks as a pass rusher, but all the other athleticism flashes, the stuff that you like are there, Rick. You have him number 1 as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. That was J.C. Latham that he had his biggest struggles with. Once J.C. got his big mitts on him, he kind of stalemated him at the point. And I just wish he played a little bit more violent in the run game. I mean, he had production in the run over tight ends when I charted, but when O tackles and the bigger bodies got on his body, on top of him, that's where he lacked a little bit of production. But I don't have any doubt this guy is going to be the first edge rusher off the board. And maybe.
Oh, wait. Harry hit the graphic. I don't know if he's going to be the first edge rusher off the board. Dollar bet, Rick?
Dollar bet. I'm going with Pearce as the first edge rusher off the board.
You want to get in on this, Mike?
I'll get on it. I like Pearce. I think he will be.
All right. $2 for Wilson coming up, Harry. Make a note, July 24th. James Pearce Jr. A year ago, I don't think there was much conversation, right? Who would be the first? I can't even, I totally watched the 2024 draft. Who went first as the edge rusher?
What are you talking about?
Oh, it was Latu, right? Latu didn't go till 11.
15.
15. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. I was trying to remember who the edge rusher was last year. I couldn't remember. All right. So Latu certainly wouldn't have been number one a year ago. I don't think at this time. Year before that was Will Anderson Jr. I think that's a pretty safe bet. All right. I'm going not James Pearce, even though I like him. Mike and Rick on James Pearce. All right. Go ahead, Rick.
My comp?
Go. You can do comp and probably draft range is going to be, I'm guessing, in the first round.
Top 5. And then I'm going to say, reminded me a little bit. Now, if he gets stronger, I think he'll be a better, but reminded me of Kayvon Thibodeau when he came out of Oregon a few years ago. Just that length and that athleticism.
Okay. I don't hate it. All right. You ready for the game, Rick?
Yep.
Top 5, too. You okay with that, Mike?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Top 5 on my board.
All right. You guys are big James Pearce Jr. fans. Name the comp with the handsome analyst that made the comp, Rick. Robert Quinn or Randy Gregory?
Oh, boy. I'm going to say I like Gregory's comp a little bit better, not off the field, just purely what we're talking about on the field. I'm going to go Mike said Gregory.
All right, Harry, we need to get a sad trombone clip too, because I did Randy Gregory, Rick.
Oh, God, am I horrible.
Yeah.
The only reason I went with, or I didn't say Quinn, was because I thought Quinn was a little bit more explosive against the run, getting into the block a little quicker, a little bit better run player when he came out.
Randy Gregory was the other guy I had in mind, truthfully. That one.
Here we go. We're all coming around to Ryan Wilson's way of thinking.
Oh, boy. And then the podcast ended.
Hey, Mike, let me ask you this, because when I talk to our buddy Pete Prisco, and he makes this point a lot, the more he talks to people in the league, the more he's convinced that anyone could do this job. Where do you come down on that? After sometimes spending time with folks that are evaluators and scouts and stuff, are you more or less in awe of what they do?
That's good. I do think that there is a steep learning curve in that, like, you think you know more than you do starting out than you actually. Yeah. There is a big learning curve to evaluating prospects. I don't think it's too much more though than hours put in and like learning from anyone. Like, I don't think there's like the whole scouting eye some people see better than others. I think some people are just more disciplined in their scouting than others. Is like the real trick to scouting is to have kind of a system, a rubric, things that you actually look for and that you trust to translate and not fly by the seat of your pants. I mean, it's like anything else. So I do think in the NFL, I think one of the biggest things I would change if I were like running a team is prioritizing someone with intelligence first and then teaching them football second, rather than football knowledge first and then teaching them to scout second, because I think it's something that you can learn if you just have the basis to do so.
And Rick, you've talked about this. You've been really good about being open-minded. And I think you've said in the past 3 years as a scout, and then you sort of should know what you're doing after 3 years, right?
Yeah, because then you saw your first cycle and whether they were successful or not in the NFL. We always felt that, I think, me, according to Mike's theory, I would not be sitting here today or would never become an NFL GM because I was probably more of a football player than an intelligent guy.
That's not true. You got your master's. You're actually quietly. You don't like people to know you're smart. You like to play up the football thing. That's not true. Go ahead.
But I did. Half of my staff, believe it or not, were Ivy League grads.
Nice.
And I always believed, hiring smart people.
Yep.
Scouting is not rocket science. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Scouting, you become a better scout the more you see and the bigger library you build in your head. So your first year, your second year, you're not going to have that library, but the more you can build and then learn off of what you did that first year. I always gave that example of Robert Porcher my first year.
Right.
I put a 7th round pick on because he went to South Carolina State. We ended up drafting him when I was at Detroit Lions in the 1st round. So
you thought he was not more than, you thought he was way more than a 7th rounder.
Yeah, but I didn't know because it was at South Carolina State and he was, beating the Ryan Wilsons off the edge.
But that was in high school. I didn't make it to South Carolina State.
Scouting is all experience and learning. And then to me, I always thought that if you did make mistakes in your evaluations, that was the best way to learn. That's why you don't have just one scout look at a player. That's why you have, we had 5 to 7 looks on guys. So when I was listening to everybody, I can make a cross-reference. And what I did as a general manager, what took some time is, like we do the rookie reports, Ryan, in the fall.
Yep.
Every team that we were playing, I wrote up the rookies if they were on the field, what they did in the preseason, and I wrote a report on them as a rookie, and I would send it to all the scouts, the older scouts and the younger scouts. This is what we had on him, but this is what he's doing right now. So hopefully that helped them grow as evaluators. But to me, even today, and I've looked at guys for over 30 some years, I learn something every day, but at least when I write someone up, I have a big enough library in my head that I can go through that Rolodex pretty good. And, oh yeah, this guy reminds me of, Bobby Schikowitz, who came out of, where'd you go to school, Ryan? With
Come on,
William and Mary.
There you go.
Yeah, Bill and Mary. That's
to add to that, I will say, I think the worst thing you could do if you're just starting off scouting is just to watch the tape, write your report, and then never have any of your things challenged or talk to anyone about the prospects. I think that's why I said I was so excited when we first did the first podcast to talk to you guys, is because I learned, when your opinions get challenged, when you hear other opinions from people that you respect their evaluations, it improves your eye and what you're watching and how you watch. So to just say, trust the tape, trust your evaluation. No, I think it should be a collaborative process anytime you are trying to evaluate players.
No, that's important. And Rick, you talked about Rick, you've been doing this forever, but for someone like me or Mike, who haven't been doing it for 30 years, doing it for much less than that, you don't know what you don't know. I think that's called, and Harry probably knows, like the Kruger-Dunning effect or the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you learn a little bit and you think you know a lot about it. And the more you learn, the less you end up knowing. And I think, of course, Harry knows it. He's sending me a message real quick. Dunning-Kruger. Thank you, Harry. But I think being around Rick and being around, and one of the things that I found helped me, and Rick, tell me what you think of this. When you talk to young scouts, you realize they know maybe a little bit more than you, but not a ton more than you. And I'm talking about the media, not Rick Spielman, 30-year general manager. And I think that helps you sort of understand that we're all sort of working through this thing together. And no one knows anything, because when you see these players in 3 or 4 years, a lot of them are guys that you weren't necessarily focused on.
Yeah. Well, no one's ever perfect. Even some of the great ones, the Bill Polians, the Ron Wolfs of the world, they've had their misses too. So, but to me, I always looked at it, if we missed, which I took it personal, too personal at times, that you take that, and that's how you get better. That's how you grow.
Right.
Because one of the things we did was, what I learned from the guys I worked with in the military was after action review, AARs, and go back. Why did we miss on this guy, so we don't make the same mistake? And guys, if we did miss on a draft, whether it's a 1st round, whether it was a 7th rounder, during this time when they come to training camp, we would sit there and go through, was it something we missed in the psychological score, intelligence scores? What didn't we see on tape that we missed on tape? Most of the time, It was more some other element or some other intangible where it actually helped us grow as evaluators, because I looked at us as one unit by going back and assessing where you made that mistake. And a lot of times it was some of the intangible, these things you do through the pre-draft process.
Right. Yeah. And that's what, I mean, in part, that's what makes this a lot of fun and different from than just watching Sunday or Saturday football, because you're trying to figure these things out. And also what probably makes it incredibly, I mean, you get excited around the draft, but it can also be frustrating. I think you only said the only time you really got mad was when you missed out on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got mad a few times, but that was one of them.
Draft related.
Yeah, well, that was a situation where we had a deal with a team, and
okay,
then they backed out on us.
Gotcha. All right, so that was a nice little side. By the way, great answer by Mike. That, if you wonder why Mike's gonna be a politician in 15 years, it's answers like that. When I tried to put him on the spot, and he nimbly moonwalked his way out of that and then turned it into something positive. Well done, Mike. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about my number one player, which is right on cue here, breaking with form with Mike and Rick. We'll talk about Mykel Williams right after this.
You hear that? It's the steady pulse of the world's game that's turning fans into family and sport into passion. You hear that? It's the heartbeat of American soccer. The USL on CBS Sports Network.
All right, Mykel Williams, edge rusher out of Georgia, 6'5", 265. He's a third-year junior, so he's also could return to school if he so chooses a season from now. But I had him as the ideal mix, speed, power, has a nonstop motor, looks pretty long on tape, and if he is in fact 6'5", 265, that's long. He moves well in space, shows some juice as a pass rusher. Excuse me. I thought he moved well laterally and north and south. There were a lot of things that jumped off the tape at me in terms of what he was able to do. Didn't do it quite as frequently as some of the other guys, but he played on the Georgia team where you have 45 stars competing for playing time. So it's just a matter of can he do it more consistently. But I thought that he did everything at a pretty high level. Rick, did you not watch Mykel, or he's not top 5 for you?
Well, I did watch him. And this was probably my brain fart of the day.
Oh, because I saw the list. I was like, okay.
This morning I'm looking at, and I'm going through the list as I get prepared so I can do a good job for Harry, the producer, on the behind the window there, whatever he's doing right now. And I was like, why did I not? And, because there was some pretty good pass rushers here. I don't want to be biased towards the Ohio State kids, but if you grade his flashes, they're pretty damn good.
Right.
Because he is a unique athlete. He has unique speed. I think he plays with his hair on fire. My two biggest negatives were he plays too tall. He has a high pad level, and technically he's all over the place. But if he's almost like a here was my comp to him. I'll just go ahead and put it right out the bat. And I don't know who the hell you guys thought he was, but I'm going back and forth. And, you can see Walker a little bit in him, who was a little raw that came out, was the number 1 overall pick.
Trevon.
Yeah. But mine was Danielle Hunter, is what the flashes I saw a little bit in him. Not a lot of production, but played hard. And everything and all the negatives that he has should be correctable with coaching. If he checks all the boxes, and it looks like he does, at least the way he plays, with passion, good kid, wants to get better, all that stuff. But that was my probably brain fart of the day, that he should have been up there. And then I had him below those guys, and then usually I try to go back, and I didn't go back, and I'm like, what are you doing with your life right now?
That's usually what you say to me, so I feel better about that. So Danielle was a third round pick.
What do
you think about Mykel?
I think if he takes a step forward, he's a first-round pick.
Okay.
I just had him not as polished as some of these other guys, but may have a much higher ceiling or higher upside to him. So I can see, and I always talk to you, Ryan, just side on the optimism on these players during the summer, and then we'll get corrected as we go down. And I didn't follow my rule of siding on the optimism. And then I like, well, Daniil was a third rounder. Maybe I should keep him a little bit below that right now.
Yeah.
But, technically Daniil should have been high. We got lucky to get Daniil in the third round. So I was going with that Daniil Hunter situation, right? Not Daniil Hunter that we see now, but Daniil Hunter, what I did before going into the season. And even during the season, we drafted him in the third. He didn't have he had 1.5 sacks. But you've seen a lot of the same physical traits and God-given gifts that this kid has.
All right. Well, I'll be interested to see what you think of the comp game in a second. But Mike, you had Mykel Williams as your number 2 edge rusher behind James Pearce.
Yeah, he's quintessential Georgia defensive line. Like the guys they've turned out in recent years are all just freak athletes they really haven't developed high-end pass rushers. Like they are not in that regard. They play the run really well. They're very disciplined. They play hard, but he does not have much in his toolbox as a pass rusher just yet. But again, a young guy, but the pure size, length, explosiveness combo, like if he just figures out a bull rush, you said he rushes too tall, and I agree, but if he just figures that out, if he sinks a little bit more, he doesn't need too much more. He's like in that caliber of athlete that 1 to 2 moves, he can be a problem. So because of that, that's why I'm pretty high on him. I think ultimately he ends up in the top 10 to 15 in the draft. And I think at the Florida State game, in the bowl game, we really saw like the potential of what he could be.
That Florida State game was unfair. That's the Rice that was the Rice on their schedule last year.
Yeah. I'm still looking for that defensive end from Rice. I haven't been able to find him yet.
Well, it's funny because when I look at these edge rushers in particular, I go to look to see where they had the most pressures and sacks, and he put up like 50 sacks and 85 pressures against Florida State. I was like, wait, when was that game? I was like, oh, it was the bowl game.
Just so you know, I didn't watch that game because I'm not going to judge him off.
But to Mike's point, I mean, you saw flashes that throughout the year, and I thought it was interesting to Mike talking about that there's not a lot in his pass rush arsenal. They use him a lot on twists and stunts, just to say use your athleticism to win through the A or B gap and then harass people, and that's sort of what he did. I think he's a probably middle of first rounder right now. I think he's a little higher for me than obviously James Pearce Jr., but you guys like James a little better. All right, Rick, you ready for the game here?
Yep.
And I think these players sort of fit into the Daniil Hunter mode. We'll see what you think.
Did you like my Daniil Hunter comparison?
Yeah, but something to keep in mind, and this is going to show up a few more times, I feel like, Mike. Rick leans on hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of scouting research to use the former Minnesota Vikings comps as his comps for these players, where, I'm working on a shoestring budget here. So that's a little unfair. But I like Daniil Hunter as a comp here. All right, here we go. You ready?
Yep.
You're 0-1 so far. Max Crosby and Bud Dupree.
I'm going to go with Mike, and I'm going to go with Bud Dupree.
Oh, you didn't fall for it. You got that right. You got it right. Mike said Bud. I said Max. Max, is Max too rich? Because Max came out, he was a little. No one was talking about Max. Who Max
One
is?
thing I'll say about Max is he plays another guy that plays with his hair on fire, and he's gotten better. But I don't think he is fluid of an athlete.
Ooh.
I think as this kid is.
Oh, you think Michael's more fluid than Max?
Oh yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why I kind of lean, because I don't know where you come up with your comps. It's amazing to me, some of the comps you come up with, but I try to look at athleticism and things like that. So
I would just say this: if Mykel Williams ends up being Max Crosby and you get him in the 15th, middle of the first round, I think you feel pretty good about that.
Where was Crosby drafted?
Just 4th rounder, wasn't he?
4th, yeah.
Daniil, 3rd round. That's where I kind of made my brain fart.
Draft the athletes that fall there.
All right. Well, that's one brain fart down. At least one more to go. Is that right, Rick?
Yeah, no. One's good enough for me for the day.
Okay. All right. Next up, our first instance of an Ohio State player making the list, J.T. Tuimoloau. We thought he might come out last year. For some reason, Ricky didn't come out. I don't know why. I'll let you start because I like him. I think you like him a little more than me. You had him number 2 on your list, and I had JT. Oh, no, there he is. Number 3. Excuse me. I'm losing my place. Go ahead.
Yeah, the size is there. I think he's athletic. He can play with strength and power. He's just not consistent, and that's his only thing. For whatever reason, You watched that Penn State game 2 years ago, and he looked like top 5 pick, maybe top pick in the draft. But it just seems like the dots don't always connect, or there's something. Sometimes he looks dominant, other times that he doesn't. But as you weigh through all these tapes, and I've done 2022, I've done 2023 on this kid. He could, I thought that he walked Fashanu back in the Penn State game right into the quarterback with a one arm. Why don't you show that all the time? And then he just disappears at times in games, which drives me crazy. But if there's ever a switch that you can get to keep it on full throttle, like some of the plays, because he can win with power, he can win with counter spins. He doesn't have the dynamic sack numbers that you would say a first round pick should. It's there. It's just, to me, and that's the question I'm going to ask in draft meetings. How do you get it out of him on the flashes that we see to do it on a consistent basis?
I agree with all that. And I thought had he come out last year, he probably would have gone in the second round at the earliest.
That's why he came back in the first.
Mike, I'm guessing you watched JT?
Yeah, I had him just outside my top 5.
Okay.
I do. I mean, the athlete is super powerful, very hard to get him off the line of scrimmage in the run game. I think a very NFL translatable game to begin with, but I agree. The reason I got him outside the top 5 was the consistency of dominance. Like if you just watch the Penn State game against Olu, you'd be like, okay, yeah, that guy could be easily a first rounder. But then other games, like you said, disappears for long stretches. I think he struggles to win the edge. And I worry about guys who really can't get to the edge consistently. And I worry about his balance as well. Finishing plays. I thought a lot of times he either, would miss tackles or just left plays on the table that he could have made. So those two things, I just had other guys higher on this list, but I would have said middle of day 2 had he come out last year.
Even in that within the Penn State game, I thought when he wasn't opposite Olu and Rick, this could be me projecting. It felt like he turned it on because he knew it was Fashanu, but it felt like other times he sort of turned it off. And to your point about trying how to get the most out of him, what are you looking for a defensive line coach to tell you to make you feel good about it? Or is it just a matter of talking to the kid yourself?
I think it's just, and I've sat with kid. He's a great kid now, and comes from a great family. And he's going to test very well when he goes to the combine and does all that stuff. I have a sneaking suspicion when I watched him in the weight room and stuff, he's going to do some pretty unique things. It's just, and I told him this personally. I said, listen, dude, I said, you're a first round talent that plays like a Friday guy because I don't know what I'm going to get down in and down out from you for whatever reason. So
how'd he take it?
Well, he came back to prove me wrong, which I love that. It's like, Terrion Arnold. I changed his whole career path. Right.
But you've had players that didn't take it particularly well when you gave them the truth, or what your version.
I don't have. I told them I don't have.
I know you don't care, but I'm more interested in how they react to you being you.
So, what do you mean, me being me? I take that as
nothing. Don't worry about that part. I want to know how he reacts to your cold hard truth.
He was very good.
Okay.
He said, "I'm going to prove you wrong."
And good. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Says, well, let's see.
Awesome. All right. Love it. All right. Do you have a comp off the top of your head, Mike, or no? If not, that's fine.
I did not have it. Maybe like Carlos Basham is kind of how I saw him.
Oh. That's interesting. So I'm going to change my comp. It doesn't matter. I just wrote it down here for Harry. But since Mike has one,
Basham was a lot shorter.
Let's see.
Basham's not that short.
Basham, the kid from Wake Forest.
Yeah, Boogie.
Yeah,
not his brother
too.
Well, here's
that was just off the dome. I didn't have that one prepped.
Oh, look at that! He gave us a little Harry Mack there off the dome. How you like that? Rick, your comp was David Ajabo, and mine. I didn't put it in initially because it would have given me away, but since Mike didn't have JT in his top 5, Bud Dupree was sort of the first name that came to mind.
Well, it's better than Basham. I'll give you that.
Okay. Well, in Mike's defense, he wasn't prepared. He was just trying to be helpful.
Then I would be very careful about whose name you throw out on this podcast.
That's true. He's learning that lesson the hard way. All right. Let's keep this train running here. We're getting a little sidetracked. Next up. Now, I didn't watch Nic Scourton. So I'll admit that straight up. So
He's good.
Rick, you had him 4, and Mike, you had Nic Scourton 3. So Mike, I'll start with you. Tell me about the Purdue transfer who's now at Texas A&M.
He's a big dude, man. He's 6'4", 280, and just thickly built. Like, it's in his arms, it's in his midsection, it's in his thighs. Like, he is a big guy that, if you really wanted to, I think you could even bulk him up and play him inside even full time. I think he's got that kind of versatility. But I really liked him the most when he was off the edge, got a little head of steam, because I loved his body control when approaching blocks, loved his ability to get on sync, get to the edge, get on, rip back to the quarterback. I think he has some of the heaviest hands in this class, and that's something you rarely say for a guy who's, only a rising junior, only a third-year player. Get off isn't really special, but he's 280. 280-pound rushers are unique at any level. So maybe a little bit of a tweener, but I see him as a true edge that can kick inside in a pinch. So I love what he did on tape this past year. I'm excited to see what he does at Texas A&M, though, because obviously he was really the only guy rushing at Purdue, but Texas A&M's D-line is kind of loaded, so he may not get that much attention this year.
So unofficially, Rick, 6'4", 280. He is a junior. Again, I didn't watch him, but I already have a comp for him, so look forward to that.
Okay. The way that Purdue played him, they played him from a 2-point all the time. And all you do, they put him in a 9 technique, which is wide, and then he just crashes every play. So, but the dude plays with violence, and that's something that I really liked. And I agree with Mike, the heavy hands and the ability to jack people up, this guy does. I'm anxious to see what Texas A&M, how they utilize him, if they'll put him in a 3-point stance, because I like to see that more, because that's what he's going to have to do. He's not going to be a stand-up outside linebacker. I think he has enough ability to play an edge, and he is powerful. I was surprised for as big as he was, how quick he was using some counter moves. And this guy will chase you down all over the field now. He plays down in and down out like it's supposed to be played. I think he's got some technique issues from a raw. I don't know if he has a pass rush plan, but I don't know if I don't want to downgrade him, because Purdue just says just crash and run into things. So I'm anxious to see what Texas A&M does with him. There was some scuttlebutt about him coming out last year, but decided to enter the transfer portal. I didn't think he was a first-round pick last year when I watched him, but I think this guy can, if he does what I think he's going to do at Texas A&M, and he learns how to come out of a 3-point, he can really improve his draft stock.
So just listening to you and Mike talk about him, the name that came to mind, and tell me how far I'm off on this, because I haven't seen him. Keon White?
I think he is a better athlete.
Ooh.
Some of that power.
Yeah.
I can see what, as you're just throwing, darts against the wall, see what sticks, like you do most of the time on this podcast.
That one sounds like it stuck.
It didn't stick, or one part of it stuck.
Okay.
But this guy is more of a better edge rusher, I think, or has potential to be, because I think he's more fluid as an athlete than Keon White.
Well, I'm interested to hear what you think about Mike's comp, because Mike has a good one too.
Tamba Hali. That's who I went with.
Who?
Tamba Hali.
Oh, yeah. That's a decent one. Who the heck did I say?
You ready for yours?
Was it Pay or was it Verse?
Quiddy
Pay.
Yeah.
Was another one who I thought had, because if we didn't end up with Darrisaw, it was between him and Quiddy Pay were the two that we were looking at. And Indy and Ballard took Pay, and then that's where we got Darrisaw.
By the way, another one of your draft picks just got a huge deal in Christian Darrisaw.
Love Darrisaw coming out.
Do you get a percentage of that or no?
No, I just get how's my time was expired in Minnesota, and I got promoted to a podcast after the last 2 drafts were Darrisaw and Justin.
And Justin Jefferson. Yeah. Do better, Rick. Do better. Both you guys, first, second round range for Nic Scourton?
I'd say first. Yeah.
All right. First round. Okay. All right. Next up, number 5, finally, in our edge rush class, before we get to some names to watch. Jack Sawyer, edge rusher out of Ohio State. And neither Mike nor I had Jack. Nice graphic there. Producer Harry, OHIO sack. All right, Rick, make your case for Jack Sawyer, because he feels like a day 2 guy for me right now. Felt like a day 2 guy last year. And he's not in the same conversation as JT for me.
No, I think this guy is a steady Eddie, if you want to classify him as that. He makes his share of plays. I think he does need to be a little bit more violent at the point, but he does have a knack for slipping blocks. I think he's instinctive to find the ball carrier. I thought he struggled. Like when I watched JT versus Fashanu, and then I watched him on that side, wasn't the same. So that's why he's behind JT. I think he needs to improve his first step quickness, in my opinion. And I think he can do that. I thought he struggled if he got locked on early in the pass rush. And when he does, he just needs to get more violent at times, getting off once they lock on him in pass protection. But he is slippery. He's instinctive. He plays hard. I didn't have the tapes that I've watched. There just was nothing that was like a wow moment for me. A lot of good plays, but it wasn't like, man, let me turn that back. That was pretty unique. I didn't see him make many unique plays, just a lot of very solid, steady Eddie plays.
And I'm trying to find your comp for Jack. Oh, boy. All right, that's as steady as she goes, but this young man had a really good final season.
That's what I'm predicting. Okay. I think, because I had a little chat with him as well.
Who are we talking about?
Jermaine Johnson.
Yeah. And Jermaine, you said, has an edge to him, right?
Yes. Yeah, Jermaine had an edge to him since he was in high school, sitting in my living room.
Yeah.
Well, I had a couple of life skill talks with him.
How'd they go?
He got to be a first round pick.
Okay, well, that part stuck, I guess. How was Jack compared to him edge-wise, I guess I should say?
I just think if this kid improves his first step quickness, because he is long, he is athletic, he just doesn't play with that. I just want to see more Tays. I told him, you got to do something that pops off on tape.
Mm-hmm.
You're steady. You make a lot of very good plays. I thought Jermaine was like that at Georgia when you graded some of his plays at Georgia. Then all of a sudden he went to Florida State, and then it was a different cat when you watch him at Florida State. So I'm hoping that Jack, because I think he does have first round ability. When you see him come in, he's as pretty as they come too, body type wise.
Right.
And if he can just let it loose, it's like just unleash the beast and go. And I think if he does that he can potentially be a first rounder.
How do you take your advice?
They were all great. All these Ohio State kids, and I've talked to 20 of them. You're going to be they're, as you used to say in the past, until you got fined over $200,000 saying fine young man.
Oh, yeah.
This guy is a fine young man.
Great. Good. Love to hear it. All right, let's speed this thing up here. I do want to get to this one player. That's our top 5 guys, but sort of guys to keep an eye on as well. And Mike, I want to come to you about Abdul Carter, because I thought about watching him because he's moving from off ball to edge rusher, and he's 250 plus, I believe, at least unofficially. I didn't get around to it. Maybe I'll watch him before the start of the season. Maybe I won't. But I want you to sell me on Abdul Carter. And, of course, the obvious questions being from Penn State and the position change. Are we looking at what's his name?
Yeah, Micah Parsons. No, there's no Micah Parsons. Yeah. Parsons was in a different realm, athletically, than anyone else. I mean, what he read, like 4.36.
Right.
Abdul Carter, though, it wouldn't surprise me if he breaks 4.5 at that size, at 6'3", over 250. He is explosive, and maybe not great height, but I think he has long enough arms. Like Parsons had really short arms that actually coming. I think he has like the shortest of the edge in the NFL still, but Carter has a better length. Just he was an off-ball linebacker. So really the only reps you're seeing are him as a blitzer, but that athlete is what it looks like, right? So I do think that he's in for a breakout season, and I love that Penn State defensive line. There's a lot of guys on that defensive line. So there's just not going to be a lot of guys that have his physical tools coming out. So that's why I put him in my top 5.
And look, man, unofficially 6'3", 259. He is a junior. Rick, when you hear about the position change, I mean, I know you're going to wait and see, but any concerns? Why wouldn't you keep him at off ball? Like, or anything
No,
you're asking questions about?
I think he's best going forward. I wrote him up, but he was my number one linebacker. So I'll talk about him in the next podcast. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he's just coming purely off the edge, because that's a different. But if he spikes as a edge rusher, that's just going to enhance it. You know that he's a good I think he's a pretty good damn off the law linebacker. I was kind of surprised, for as big as he is, how fluid he was in coverage, but he's going to make his living getting after the quarterback.
Were you concerned? Any issues with Micah Parsons taking the year off? Number one, a lot of guys did, but also the move to edge.
No, I think it was a unique. He was such a unique athlete. There were just some other things that had surfaced during the pre-draft process.
Gotcha.
And I'll leave it at that.
Let's leave it at that. Let's also take a quick break because we're running a little long here. So the other players that were on our top fives, I'm sure we will get to them in the coming weeks and months, no doubt about it. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the interior defensive linemen right after this.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
All right, edge rushers in the book. Interior defensive lineman up next. What do we got, Harry? Here we go. A little less suspense here. Mason Graham, number one for all of us. Deone Walker, number two for all of us. Someone slipped something in my drink. I have Tyleik Williams at number 3 out of Ohio State. Me and Rick do. And then Dontay Corleone. Mike has him at number 3 out of Cincy. I also have him on my list. I didn't know we were going with Howard Cross, by the way, guys, because I'm a huge Howard Cross fan. But Mike, he's 255-ish. Is that right?
No, he's like 290.
Oh, okay. Because I was looking at his numbers. I was like, does he weigh that? Is he that light? Okay, good. Then he should have. He's like number 6 for me, but he didn't make my top 5. But you and Rick had him. I love the way he played. Last year I put him in my top 50 as an honorary member, my midseason top 50 list, because I just loved the motor with which he played. But Rick, you had Kenneth Graham as well out of Michigan. Mike had that as well. And am I missing anyone? I think that's it. I had Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss as another name, a player I watched and liked. All right. With the first pick aggregate list, no surprise, Mason Graham, first up. Man, he is fun. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this guy's a special DT prospect. I think this is a special DT class. Like I think compared to some recent ones, this may be the strongest position just right now in the entire draft. But Graham is, for his sophomore tape, DT is a position that usually 3rd, 4th years when guys really start to get their footing at the collegiate level, just because it's such a physically demanding position. But for him to be this good this early on, to me, is pretty rare. His feet are what really separates him. I don't think there's too many weaknesses to his game, truly. Like watching his tape, there's not much I don't think that I wrote down that was truly negative. But I think his lateral agility is what really separates him. He can cross the face on a stunt, slant, and really get home in a hurry when he wants to. And so that combined with, I think a fairly advanced or just fairly refined for a guy who's only a sophomore skill set as a pass rusher, he's probably going to be a top 5 pick if I had to guess right now, unless like it really gets crowded out by some QBs in this class.
Mike and Rick have all their picks. You make fun of me, Rick. You guys all have top 5 picks. I do love this guy, though. I wrote elite athleticism and short area quickness paired with nonstop motor, lateral quickness, and quick first step. Consistently causes problems for interior offensive linemen. And I thought he used his hands really well in addition to the foot speed and quickness that Mike just talked about. Rick, you like him too. He's your number 1 DL.
Yeah, the only negative, I agree with everything's been said, is that when they double him with center guard on top of him and pass rush, he just needs to come up with a better plan. Right now he doesn't. That can neutralize him, but this guy is one of the most complete defensive tackles I've seen come out in a long, long time.
Better athlete than Chris Jenkins?
Yes.
I think so.
Chris Jenkins from last year?
He was insanely athletic. I didn't love his tape, but he tested really
kind
well.
Of a linear athlete, I thought. Graham's much more fluid all around.
Just got to ask the questions, Rick. The people want to know.
No, he is a much better athlete.
Okay. Is he a better athlete than J.J. McCarthy, one of your favorite players on planet Earth? That's a joke. All right, who's your comp, Rick? And is he a top 5 pick?
I think he's got a chance to be maybe the first defensive player off the board.
Yeah. You get no pushback here.
I went with Quinion Williams.
I don't hate that. Quinnen was insanely athletic. Quinnen had that one big year, so bigger body of work for Mason. But I take your point. So you said potentially first defensive player, top 5-ish. You're okay with that as well. All right, you ready for the game, Rick? You're 1-1 as we sit here, I believe.
Yep.
Christian Wilkins or Kyle Williams?
Oh my God, Kyle Williams. No, I'm going to go with Mike said Christian Wilkins.
How dare you, sir? Nope, that was Mike.
I didn't like my comp, I'll be honest.
Mike is throwing me a bone. I appreciate it, Mike. Just so we're clear, I said Christian Wilkins. Mike said Kyle Williams. So, Rick, you were 1 and 2.
Kyle Williams of LSU. Is that the Kyle Williams you were trying to compare him to?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, everybody has an off day, Mike. Just keep working at it, bud.
Does that are you okay with Christian Wilkins, or are you mad about that had you not heard Kyle Williams' name?
Wilkins is better.
Okay. Thank you. Mike owned it. I give him that. All right, next up. We all love Mason Graham. I think Mike's right. We talked about the wide receiver class being meh-ish compared to recent years. This defensive line class feels really good. Deone Walker. Oh, these comps are. Oh, I think Mike and I are on the same page with these comps. Yours is there too, Rick. All right, yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
You got it. I'll come to you first, Rick. I thought that Deone played with some of the strongest hands I had seen in quite some time. I love his body type because it's a little different, but he was a huge problem for anyone that happened to be in his way. And they lined him up all over the place too.
Yeah. I really like this kid. I think he has a lot of upside to him. For as big as he is, he really has look like really thin pins or lower body, thin on tape. I can't wait to see this guy in person. But I think his pad level gets high. He's just so physically dominant versus single blocks. Double teams are where, because his pad level high, he'll get mauled at times in there. I think he shows flashes as a pass rusher. Sometimes I think in games he got winded at times, and I understand these guys play a lot, but this guy can rush the passer inside. He has to get his pad level lower in both areas, and a little raw with his technique. But I think defensive line coaches are going to love this kid and develop him as a pass rusher because he doesn't have a plan right now. He's just physically out there, just better than everybody physically.
Yeah.
He just needs to figure out he's not going to be able to do that at the NFL level. So there's a lot of raw tools to work with here.
Are you less concerned than you were even when we started doing this podcast about wearing down at the end of the games? Because you told the story about who was Jalen Carter?
Mazi Smith.
Oh, Mazi Smith.
Yep. Yeah, that person, one person I talked to says that you got to remember that these guys are playing 60, 70, 80 snaps. They don't get rotated in. These big guys get tired where they're not going to play that many snaps in an NFL game. So you can see these guys wear down because of the amount of reps that they're getting in the games.
So, Mike, like me and Rick, you had him number 2, so clearly you like Deone too.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a mammoth, and his upper body strength is prodigious for a man that size. I mean, just he one-on-one controlling blocks is so easy for him. And I thought he had great body control for a guy that, like, he can actually move side to side. Whereas, Jordan Davis coming out of Georgia was kind of similarly built, but just did not have the kind of body control that Walker has. Like, he throws in spin moves. He throws in shuffles, shimmies. Like, you never saw that. You rarely see that from big guys' tape. So that's nice to see. And yeah, the pad level is not good. He is 6'6", though. It's never going to be good. He has to play a different game, and he can be targeted with double teams. But single block is just, I don't see a lot of guys, if he really reaches his full potential, that are going to be able to hang with him in the run game one-on-one.
Yeah, and I think we're all on the same page with Walker. Rick, comp, draft range.
Christian Barmore. I think this guy's a first-round talent, but Christian was built similar to this guy. He was a little bit lower, or a little bit thin through his lower, and then he didn't play I didn't like Christian in the beginning, but then the way he played the second half of that year and in that bowl game for Alabama, then all of a sudden this dude has a chance to be pretty good, and Barmore's a pretty good player now for New England.
Yeah, Deone's a third-year junior. I have him unofficially at 6'6", 348. We'll find out. Rick talked about his lower half. We'll see what that looks like as well. But if those are the numbers, again, the athleticism is what catches your attention, and the power as well. All right, Rick, here we go. You're 1-2 as we sit here in the comp game. Match the comp with the person.
Mike, got a better job if you're killing my percentage on your comp.
A good musician never blames his instrument, Rick. Here we go. Albert Hainsworth, Dexter Lawrence.
Ooh, two pretty good comps.
What?
I'm going to go with Mike and Albert Hainsworth.
Oh, you got that one right. You're 2-2.
There we go.
Now you were focused on that one.
That one I felt better about.
All right, we did. We're doing Rick's job for him, Mike. So we're doing the right thing. They made it easier for him. All right, next up, number 3, Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. Rick, you had him third. Somehow I had him third as well. Mike didn't have him in his top 5, but we'll talk about that in a second. Rick, I'll start with you. If he had come out last year, I thought he had a chance to probably be a day 2 guy.
Yeah,
but incredibly twitchy for his size. He's incredibly athletic for his size. They dropped him in coverage last year at times, and he looked quite comfortable doing that in the middle of the field on those shallows. What do you think about Tyleik?
I thought his strength is the run game because he is very explosive, powerful, and the run game jumps off the tape for me. He'll play a little high at times like some of these guys, but out of the guys we've talked about so far, this was a guy that I thought did the best job anchoring versus combos and double teams at the point. They don't move him off at the point. Very good gap control defensive tackle. His biggest negative is his pass rush right now. He's not as twitchy as the other 2 that we talked about. You'll see him working edge of a guard at times, but he needs to be more consistent getting inside pressure. But as far as playing the run, I thought that this guy did the best job holding the gap and holding up versus combos and double teams compared to the other 2 that we talked about. He's not the same pass rusher as those other 2.
Right. 6'3", 327 unofficially. I describe him as a slow burn at times. The run stuff stands out, but other times he's not giving you much as a pass rusher. You sort of talked about that. But I like his game. And again, talking about Jack Sawyer, comparing him to Tyleik, if he continues to take the next step, it certainly seems reasonable that he could work his way up. Comp and draft range as we sit here, Rick.
I had him in a second round right now, and I went with Devontae Wyatt.
All right. In the spirit of time, I'll just say my comp was I actually like this player coming out. You may not like the comp, Rick. That's okay. UConn's Travis Jones.
No.
Didn't like it. Okay. And I'll spare Mike the trouble of having to talk up Tyleik Williams. And we'll go right to Dontay Corleone, who was on his list. Mike, you had Dontay number 3, and I had him number 4, I believe. Number 5, excuse me. Out of Cincinnati. Let me get his numbers real quick, and then you can talk them up. Oh, my gosh. Here we go.
Like 325.
Close, 6'2", 318. He's a 4th-year junior, so he's been around for a little bit. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, so he also may not play this year with blood clot issues they discovered over the course of the offseason, similar to like what Trey Smith had coming out. But he is stout, man. I mean, he really, at that size, is difficult to move, can really get underneath offensive linemen's pads. I love that he kind of knows who he is, too, and he'll just fire off low and say good luck, kind of the same way, we saw from like Byron Murphy towards the end of last year for Texas, where it's just when you have that body type, when you have that level of explosiveness, it presents a challenge for opposing offensive interior linemen. So I like that about his game. I think he really has some range to his work in the running game. They play him a lot at like pure zero, head up nose, where he has to basically read which way it's going, get there before the center. And I thought he consistently was able to do that. So probably a nose tackle at the next level, but hopefully we see him play this year because the guy is very talented.
I didn't know about the blood clot. So, yeah, hopefully that works out for him. But to your point about him putting him over the nose, he consistently gave sort of these undersized zone centers trouble.
Oh, my God. That poor kid from, what's it, Houston?
Houston game was a bad game for the Houston kid.
Yeah, that kid was like coming out of the huddle and was just saying, again.
All right. So you watched him, Rick. What do you think about Dontay?
Yeah. He is a powerful human being now. I just didn't like his length. But
Okay.
first step quickness, flashed a little bit of pass rush, the range, like Mike said. The only reason I didn't have him I went with Howard Cross over him as my fifth, just because I think he's a nose. I think Cross is a 3 technique, so I went with the 3 technique over the nose.
All right. I won't say anything until we get through this thing to this next section here. You're 2-2, Rick. Match the comp with the person. Kenny Clark, Christian Boyd.
I'm going to go with Ryan this time, and I'm going to go Kenny Clark.
Wrong.
Oh, I should have went with my instinct.
I like the Kenny Clark comp, and I thought about it. Christian Boyd, obviously, I think he was a day 3 guy. I like Christian Boyd a lot coming out, but just the way he's built gave me Corleone vibes. And Mike touched on it. Like, you can't say Byron Murphy, but he looks like that if you're sort of squinting and watching him play. But the Kenny Clark one I feel much better about. So that's on me, Rick.
Comp was?
Who?
This short, squatty, athletic Mozzie Smith.
Okay. Yeah.
Mozzie. That's. I know Mozzie was insanely athletic, but in terms of production, I don't think.
But Twitch and everything, when Mozzie went, he looked like this kid.
No, you're right. I was trying to. Speaking of Michigan, Kenneth Grant. Rick, you had him 4, and you had him 5, Mike. So, Mike, go ahead. Tell me about Kenneth Grant, defensive lineman. Kenneth Grant, out of Michigan.
We talked about the other Michigan athletes. He might be the most impressive, just like testing athlete when it comes out of any of those DTs in Michigan, because he's 6'3", almost 340. And I mean, he can fly. He chases down running backs in the open field at that size. Truly impressive what he can do. I don't think he really knows how to take on blocks just yet. Like, he is truly work in progress. And given what I saw on tape this past year, like, I think he's 2 years away. I don't think he ends up coming out this year, just because what he could be in time is like a top 10 pick. Like, that's what he is capable of, but he's just very far away from a technical standpoint. Weird build too. I mean, we talked about Deone Walker and his spindly legs. He's kind of got that as well. Carries a lot of that weight in his upper body, but yeah, it has some unique physical gifts that, if developed, can turn something special.
Rick, I didn't watch Kenneth Grant. What'd you see?
A lot of the same things. He had a sack in the Alabama game with a counter spin, which kind of showed for a big man a little bit of the athleticism that Mike was talking. And then he bull rushed the guard in Washington. But I think he still needs some time to refine his game, I guess would be the best way to put it, because I think he's more of a steady Eddie type right now. He wasn't a game changer, and maybe it was unfair because I'm watching his buddy right next to him, Graham, and to me it's too different. You know, you don't want to downgrade this kid too much, but he's not Graham either. So sometimes you got to be careful when you're watching 2 guys at the same time, and you got maybe a top 5 pick in Graham, and then this kid I had as a Friday pick, day 3, because he didn't have the same production or didn't jump off as well. Although I recognize he is big and he is athletic, just not the same. He just didn't jump off the tape the way Graham did. And maybe that's unfair comparison because I'm watching both of them together.
I didn't mention it, so I'm creating a little extra work for producer Harry here. But Dontay Corleone, we said day 2, second, third round guy. What do you guys think about Kenneth Grant?
I had him in round 3.
Yeah, I would say mid to late day 2 right now.
All right. Let's get to the start of the show. Howard Cross, Notre Dame. I mean, it is so much fun watching this guy play, even though if athletically he doesn't look like a lot of the other guys in this list. But Mike, you're the Notre Dame alum. I'll come to you first. I didn't have him. I had him at 6. I went back and checked just where I had him graded out, just because of the size. But he's actually bigger than I thought, so I got some numbers that aren't quite right. But Mike, tell me about Howard Cross the third.
Yeah, I mean, he's a pure 1 gap, 3 technique type of guy at the next level. Even though they played him a good amount at nose, he gets helped out by the Notre Dame scheme because he's really moving laterally a lot at the snap, and that's where he wins. He is lightning quick off the snap. He has great feet, the ability to shake offensive linemen in a phone booth that you pretty much have to have if you're going to be sub 290 trying to play in the NFL, right? Or even sub 300. You better be darn quick, and he is. So I think he can survive, but it's not going to be every scheme's going to want a guy like that because not long, not particularly strong, but he knows how to defeat blocks and he knows how to get into the backfield. And so he made a ton of plays against, so when he faced some of the less athletic offensive lines on the schedule, but even some of the better offensive lines, like I think against Ohio State, he was a massive impact player in that game, and he almost never came off the field too. So a guy that continued his motor from first snap to the last throughout this season.
Rick, that's what stuck out for me, the motor and the surprising quickness. Like, he's not Braden Fisk, but when you watch Braden Fisk for the first time, like, oh my God, this kid is moving. And I got that sort of feeling, and it was fun watching Howard Cross play. Again, not the same player, but just the initial impression of how good he is. And, basing it on his body type, it turns out that's not a good thing to do.
No, every game I watched, Ohio State, Duke, even in the USC game, he was the guy that jumped off the tape to me. And I know they got the corner that we'll talk about, who I think's excellent. They got some good players on defense, but this kid, out of all the guys we talked about, besides maybe Graham, I understand if he was 6'5" and 320 and did what he does at his size, you're talking about him as a top 10 pick because there's no one that plays with a bigger heart or more passion than this kid does.
All right, knowing that he's limited physically, what's your comp and how high can he go?
I had him third round right now because I just don't know what size. But if he's bigger, he could be a riser like Fisk was a riser, I think, last year, especially if he goes down to the Senior Bowl and dominates. I think he's going to be one of those guys. If he doesn't come in at 275 or 280, I just didn't know where his height was and his weight. I can't remember. Did I go with Kalijah Cansey?
You did.
That's who he kind of reminded me of.
Okay. I get it. All right. Before I do the comp, Mike, what round do you think, like what range are we talking about for Howard?
Yeah, middle to late, day 2. But if you really, so Cansey was probably considered that for us last year, but then just every single game was unblockable. So if he really turns into that this year, which is going to be the 6th year, we could push the stock higher, but it's just going to be tough when you're at that size always.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement. Day 2 sounds about right. All right, Rick, here we go. Last time, what are you, 1 and 2? Oh, you're 2 and 3 right now. You got to get to 500. This is the last comp. You ready?
Yep.
Eddie Goldman, Geno Atkins.
I'm going to go with Mike said Geno Atkins.
You are now 2 and 4.
Atkins is
Wait, that was Eddie Goldman was for Kenneth Grant.
Oh, I was like, Eddie Goldman weighed like 340. I was like, all right, I won't put that one on producer Harry. Who was your? Oh, okay. So you don't lose that one, Rick. You're still at 2 and 3 with an asterisk. Who was your comp for Howard Cross?
It was Tershawn Wharton.
Okay, Tershawn Wharton. All right, there you go. Rick, I'll give you the W on that one. You're 3 and 3. I'm feeling in a given mood. You admitted to the brain fart about Mykel Williams. All the votes weren't counted, so we recounted the votes for you. You get the win there. All right, who else we got? Just names to mention here. I had Walter Nolan. I watched him out of Texas A&M. And was there anyone else that we haven't? I think we talked about it, all your guys.
I think Nolan transferred to Ole Miss.
Ole Miss, sorry, that was on the graphic. Yeah, thank you. That's it. All right, that's a wrap. All right. Woo. Episode 169 in the books. Next week, defensive backs and linebackers. We'll talk Abdul Carter, but he's switching positions, so we can still talk about him in a little more in detail. Mike's already talked about his edge rusher. Otherwise, that's it. I'm exhausted. What are you doing today, Rick? You got pickleball coming up?
No, it's kind of a recovery day for me today. So
big day yesterday?
No, I've got to do my homework for Harry.
Yeah, Harry's
for Harry. We got to get that in by tomorrow. So I just tell you, the cornerback class is pretty good too. I had a tough time trying to squeeze corners and safeties all together in there to try to come up with 5. So I imagine it'll be a little different. There'll be a couple of the top guys, and linebackers were a little scattered for me as well.
a lot of the names on the list, or at least two of the names last year, are going to be on the list this year, I would imagine. Munden out of Georgia and Barrett Carter out of Clemson as well. We talked about them a year ago. Also, before we get out of here, I should say, and this is my fault, I should have made sure we talked about Travis Hunter with the wide receivers. We'll do both next week when we talk about him as a cornerback because he's just electric. He's probably a better corner than wide receiver right now, but we got a long way to go. You okay with that?
Yeah, no, and just a little teaser. If you watched the Oklahoma game where he played 2,000 snaps, he caught as many as he gave up in that game. But that's something we'll talk about next week.
Yeah. All right. That's it. Mike, when are you moving?
I move out of here on Friday, and I'll be down there next week.
Oh, all right. So next week's podcast is on Monday. Is that right, Harry?
Monday at 10.
Yep.
Monday at 10. You able to make that?
I'll be there.
That's when we're recording it. It'll go live on Wednesday, so people still get it on Wednesday.
I want to make sure we got between the golf schedule and the moving schedule. I want to make sure Mike's available. All right, that's it. Enough with the jokes. Thanks to Mike. Thanks to Rick. Thanks to producer Harry. Thanks to all you guys who watch and listen. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.